Let's welcome Judge Aiken to introduce our keynote speaker. I did forget to make one announcement. Those of you in my legal pro class, I'll be circulating a sign-in sheet, and I'll also put an extra copy over there on the ledge in case you don't see the one I circulate.
Thanks very, very much. That's way too kind an introduction, but because it's really my gift to get to be here. I look around and I see some first years. How many, raise your hand if you're a first year? Okay, that paper is due tomorrow, right? Yeah. So I know the first years, there are more first years who'd like to be here, but it's kind of a scary day handing in your first writing assignment. So for those of you who are here, I admire your ability to either organize or cast aside the time that you need to be in the library freaking out to being here with us. I want to talk about somebody who I admire greatly and who I think is a role model and should be a role model to all of you as you make decisions about how to spend your time with public interest at this law school. The UVO is known for its public interest. You've won every award with the Oregon State Bar each and every year because of your public interest, and that's just a claim to fame that all of us share as alumni, being very proud of. But I want to talk about two things before I really tell you about Jefferson Smith. Great men, great women are always our heroes. You know, we always look to them for something more to bring us to a different place in our life. But you know what? It's really, truly about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Those are truly the heroes of the world. And one of the things I want to tell you about Jefferson Smith is he personifies that ability of how to take people who just say, I'm just an ordinary person, how can I make a difference? And turning those people into seeing the world a little differently. And because the PIP's breadth of public interest in the community, I want to give you just a look at why in your legal education this matters and why you should pay close attention to the sort of the whisper of what's going to come within the crescendo of this speech. Jefferson is just a fantastic moving speaker, but more importantly, listen to the sort of the whisper of what's said, and that is ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And in one of my favorite books, I brought two different books because you can always go back and call on other people to give you a vision of what you need to do with your life. And the first is The Measurement of Success. It's Mary Wright Edelman who founded the Children's Defense Fund. It's a book that was given to me by my mother, actually, and probably 5 or 6 other people, but it's the copy I happen to love, which talks about what's important in life and lessons for life. And what I want to call under lesson number 13 is a paragraph about another real hero. Do not think that you have to make big waves in order to contribute. My role model, Sojourner Truth, a slave woman, could neither read nor write and could not stand slavery and second-class treatment of women. One day during an anti-slavery speech, she was heckled by an old man. Old woman, who do you think you're talking about? Slavery? What are you talking about? You can't do anything. Why? You can't even make a difference. How can you possibly do anything when all you're going to do is be the bite of a flea? Perhaps not, but Lord willing, I'll keep people scratching and thinking. A lot of people think that you have to be a big dog to make a difference, but that's not true. You just need to be a flea for justice, bent on building a more decent home life, neighborhood, workplace, and America. Enough committed fleas biting strategically can make even the biggest dog uncomfortable and transform even the biggest nation, such as we are, America, in the 1990s to a better community. So I'm going to implore upon all of you to become a flea for justice, whether it's in the issues of human services or if it's in other areas such as another one of my favorite authors and leaders, William O. Douglas. This is a book he wrote in the 50s for those of you who are interested in the environmental world and nature and how we need to be more attuned to where this world is going. I would call your attention to this forward in his 1950s review. I learned early that the richness of life is found in adventure. Adventure calls on all the faculties of mind and spirit. It develops self-reliance and independence. Life then teems with excitement. But man, I would say person, is not ready for adventure unless he is rid of fear. For fear confines him or her and limits his scope. He stays tethered by strings of doubt and indecision and has only a small and narrow world to explore. He wraps up his entire book with the following. We need faith. the faith of our fathers. We need a faith that dedicates us to something bigger and more important than ourselves and our possessions. We need a faith with which we can commit our lives. We need a faith for which it would be a glory to die for. Only if we have such faith are we to live a free life. Now, what does that have to do with introducing Jefferson Smith? It has everything to do with introducing Jefferson Smith, because he lives a fearless life. And I'm hoping that as you get through your legal education, sometimes it seems that you're set on a course and you're not going to follow a norm if you choose a different path. I want you to live a fearless legal career. And by a fearless legal career, it means making the following choices. You graduate from the University of Oregon with honors. You've done an enormous amount of community service and public service for this state. You understand that it's a small d democracy that you have to participate. And you decide to stretch your mind and reach, and you go to Harvard Law School. And once in Harvard Law School, you decide that an education is about investing in yourself and your ability to make a difference in a community. And so what do you choose to do? You choose to go the distance. And you get offered that incredibly fantastic, high-paid, unbelievable job in New York City, where you're going to work with the best of the best and the smartest of the smart. And you take that job, and then you get there and you look around and you say, this really isn't for me. This isn't what I'm going to do. This isn't what my legal degree and what my background and what adventure tells me and what fearlessness tells me. And so you return to Oregon and you take a job with a big firm in Portland, and you think you can have both lives. You think you can work in the community and give 100%, and you think you can work in a firm. And very quickly you find that there's a meaningful, unbelievable calling to make a difference to other people, and that you can lead differently and you can use your law degree differently. So what does Jefferson Smith do? He finds a way to take that talent, that energy, that vision, and he's the founder of the Bus Project. And he decides that small d democracy, getting people engaged, getting fleas for justice, getting people who are going to climb the mountains and seek to live a fearless life and look about and see what's possible. He is going to harness what is possible with ordinary people doing extraordinary things. It is my privilege to introduce one of my heroes and a person who puts it on the line to make a difference every single day, current State Representative Jefferson Smith.
They say history has but time for only one sentence for any one person. What will your sentence be? Thanks a lot for having me. It's an honor to be among the public interest champions of the next generation of University of Oregon lawyers. And humbling to be introduced by one of my heroes, Judge Ann Aiken. Can we get another round of applause? It really is humbling. Never say such nice lies about me. And it helps me to think of a story about a young man working in the United States Senate dining room. And a man calls the young man over and asks for another pat of butter. And the young man says, I'm sorry, sir, just one pat of butter per customer. And says, I don't know that you understand, I'm not merely a customer, I'm also a United States Senator, asking you for another pat of butter. Sir, I'm sorry, just one per person. Sent on chamber appropriations means that billions of dollars flow through my fingers and asking you for another pat of butter. So I'm terribly sorry, but just one per customer. So I'm a United States Senator. I'm asking you for another pat of butter. Who the hell do you think you are? Well, sir, I'm the guy with the butter. Now, why do I tell that story? Mostly just because I like it. But also because it reminds us that in a democracy, we are supposed to be the ones with the butter. And over the next some number of years, you will have more and more of it. And for the next 20 minutes or so, I will have a little. There is a challenge facing the public interest. Your generation, I think, will be pivotal in impacting it. and you should be thinking about what you want your life to be about. I will tell several stories. One is a quick one. Before looking forward, I want to look backwards at a thumbnail history of the past 2 American centuries. The 1800s, the agrarian age, economic and social power built around the working farm. And we built small d democratic institutions to respond to that era. It was the Jeffersonian age. States' rights ruled the day. Flash forward 100 years, 1900s, industrial era. Industrial revolution centering economic and social power around the working city. And we built small d democratic and bureaucratic mechanisms to respond to that era. It was the New Deal, the Great Society, the Interstate Highway Act. In between there was the Progressive era, about 1900 to 1917. Republican Teddy Roosevelt, Democrat Woodrow Wilson. Facing gaping wealth disparities, corruption of the political process, destruction of nature, and a workforce unprepared for a changing economy. Citizen leaders formed a new vision for our democracy. The modern public school, the modern hospital, early economic fairness legislation, antitrust law, progressive taxation, the estate tax. Job protection, child labor laws, the minimum wage, the first environmental protections, the first national parks. It was early election reform, direct election of senators, capping certain political contributions, the ballot initiative system here in Oregon, a world-turning period in our democracy. Now we are again facing a new era of this nation's and probably the world's political history. Moving from an assembly line past to an interconnected information future. This is not a new story. The information age has been in Wired magazine for, a decade or 2. It's been in Oregonian and Register Guard for at least 3 weeks. There you are. Ding! I don't know if it's, I'm rooting for newspapers, we'll say that. But here's the kicker. We have not fundamentally redesigned the mechanisms by which we govern ourselves. You go to law school on a farm calendar. And prior to that, you went to college, high school, and elementary school on a farm calendar. You got summers off for the harvest. Not because anybody thought it was pedagogically sensible to go smart, 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 dumb, smart, 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 dumb. And now we make way in law school by giving you a chance to preview jobs you might take after you graduate. We operate within old hierarchies. For 100 years, corporate leaders figured out that you could run an organization around the principle of how many people you could fit around the table. I would have 8 direct reports, and each of them would have 8 direct reports, and each of them would have 8 direct reports. And by that, I could manage an operation of multiple thousands. But what happens if that manager, if that CEO, if that mayor, if that school board member, if that University of Oregon Law School dean can email 1,000 people in a second? And what if they can email back? We can significantly redesign the way we operate institutions and bureaucracies, but in most ways we haven't yet. When Tom McCall, as Oregon's progressive Republican governor in the 1970s, focused on managing pollution, most pollution was point source. That is, most of it came from particular identifiable locations. Find effluent, cap effluent, be environmental hero. But 30, 40 years later, only a small portion of pollution is point source. The vast majority of it comes from what each and every one of us does in our everyday lives. How do you cap that? When Microsoft wrote Windows, they wrote it on top of the old DOS operating system. And so, when many of us use Windows 95, did anybody use that program? Or anybody old enough to use that program? All right, good, lots. And many of us who used it experienced crashing. Glitches from the old code. And they would write on top of it patches, but still there would be glitches. Until eventually, Microsoft ditched the old code, rewrote it, launched Windows NT, and until recently, far fewer glitches. I know, it's ruined the story a little bit. We've got a Macintosh now. They don't pay me anything. It is time, and I think time for your generation to lead a new national operating system. It is time for us to reboot our democracy. When I sat in a seat not very different from yours, I wondered how I would spend my next 30 years. What if we joined together in facing that challenge? It seems fitting to be at Oregon's largest university because Oregon is perhaps an ideal office space, a perfect cubicle farm for programmers to write this new code. Oregon can set an example to the nation of what a place can be like. In most respects, we are a humble state. I was born here. I went to high school and college here. I went to law school far away. And a classmate of mine came up to me and he said, "You're from Oregon, right?" It was relatively well known that I was from here. I was one of the few people from my state in my law school. And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Is that east or west of Ohio?" And I wasn't really sure where Ohio was. But I was pretty sure we was west. Flash forward 2 years, I was clerk of a federal judge, and we were sitting by designation in Miami around the time of the Elian Gonzalez trial. And a friend of mine and I were riding around in a cab driven by a man born, raised, and schooled in Brooklyn. The man asked us where we were from, and I said, "Well, we're from Oregon." And he said, "Is that west of here?" And we were in Miami. So I said, "Yes." 10 minutes later, same guy, same cab, same conversation. I said, "So where are you guys from?" And I thought we talked about this already, but to give him the benefit of the doubt, as if he were asking for more information, I said, "Oregon, Portland, actually." And he said, "Oh, is Oregon in Portland?" And I said, "No, actually, Portland's the largest city in Oregon." And he said, honestly good, he said, "Oh, so you're saying Oregon's a state?" And I said, "Yes, we have a governor and everything." So why do I tell that story? Again, mostly just because I like it. But also because it reminds us that in terms of geography, in terms of population, this state is not so big. But there's been at least one way in which this state has cast a long shadow, where it has wielded historical significance. Oregon has been a birthplace of forward-thinking political ideas, an incubator of cutting-edge public policy and public service. Land use planning, born in Oregon. Bottle bill, born in Oregon. Public beaches, born in Oregon. Ballot initiative system, the Oregon Plan. Labor Day, first officially recognized in Oregon. The minimum wage, born in Oregon, the Oregon Health Plan, death with dignity, vote by mail. At multiple historical intervals, this state has responded to history's questions with a different set of responses. And at the turn of this century, it has never been perhaps more important for us to answer a set of historical questions differently again. And Oregon can set an example. By way of introduction, I've been asked to say something about the bus project. The bus is an innovative vehicle for hands-on democracy, it says here. It's a line I stole from Jim Pulaski, who I will mention later. It says here, he would read, he was a professor of mine here, undergrad, and he would talk off his notes, and he would read something that he wrote and believes himself, but then he would say, "It says here," at the end. And I just always found that amusing. Never enough to laugh, but enough to, 20 years later, steal the line. The bus drives leaders, the bus drives votes, and the bus drives change. Bus volunteers have registered 50,000 voters at 250,000 doors. Political program is a 10-week boot camp for public interest leaders tomorrow. Trick or Vote is a Halloween Get Out the Vote canvas that won the Reed Award as the best national Get Out the Vote activity. Growing into a national organization with campuses in 4 states, activities in 20 plus. But ultimately predicated upon the view, far more important than any organization, that your generation will shape history. That we need to solve public interest problems, and that we need to build hands-on democracy vehicles and public interest champions to do that. If you want to follow with me, by the way, and occasionally some folks have, and I forget cards, or if you want to follow the bus, feel free to give me contact information. Molly, Matt, Henry is here. They can probably pass out a piece of paper. But there is a challenge in all of this, and the thinking about the democracy and public interest, and thinking about the law practice and the public interest, and thinking about solving common problems. Most of the power that is applied is organized around particular financial self-interest. I am a new state legislator. I have been doing it for 8 months. And most of the people in my first session in the state legislature who came to visit me were there to advocate on behalf of particular financial interests. That is not evil, but it is incomplete. Because a huge portion of our common problems, at least in a market sense, are nobody's job. It's a national debate on healthcare. Whose job is it to figure out modifying the healthcare system in a context where 6% of the gross domestic product in 1973 went to health care spending, and now it is closer to 16%, with no significant change in how we pay for it? Whose job is that? Whose job is it to figure out an education system where we get summers off? In Malcolm Gladwell's most recent book, he tracked that almost all of the growth in the education gap between wealthier and poorer students could be accounted for by what happens to richer students during summers and what doesn't happen, or does happen, to poorer students in the summers. Whose job is it? Whose job is it to figure out energy policy? ExxonMobil's? Maybe. A huge portion of our most daunting and exciting public challenges and opportunities are nobody's job. And that's why they have to be all of our jobs. That's why you are so important. You are the coalition of the benevolently irrational. Good people doing good things for no good reason. And but for you, democracy is not possible. And you are priceless. It says here. Definition of priceless: worth a lot, not for sale. They say history has time for but one sentence for any one person. George Washington was father of our country. Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. What will your sentence be? When I was in preschool, the other tallest kid in my class was a young man named Raji. And we went around answering our teacher's question about what we wanted to be when we grew up. And he just answered something different, police officer, firefighter, real estate mogul. And it got to Raji. And Raji said he wanted to be a fire engine. And I, being a busybody in the class, said, Raji, you can't be a fire engine. And he said, my mother told me I could be anything I want to be. That argument won the day. Recently, I saw Raji streaming down Broadway Street, sirens blaring. Raji's a fire engine. What will your sentence be? From an early age, Mary Broadhurst, University of Oregon Law School graduate in 1990, was passionate about children with disability. At 13, she was camp counselor for disabled kids. In college, she considered being a special ed teacher. Instead, she went to law school where she wrote a law review article on challenges handicapped kids faced in public schools. In April of 2009, Mary argued a case before the United States Supreme Court. She insisted that school districts must reimburse families who pay for special ed services that districts fail to provide. On June 23rd of this year, the court ruled in Mary's favor. Mary graduated from this law school as a champion for disabled kids. What will your sentence be? Adele Ramos graduated from this law school in 1998. She loved the outdoors. She studied environmental science and environmental law. She clerked for the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals and took a job as an advisor to the Office of the Solicitor of the Department of the Interior. She focused on water rights and related projects, pollution, protection of endangered species. In 2005, the University of Oregon lured her back to direct this school's top 10 environmental law program. This summer, Adele got a call from Interior Secretary Ken Salazar asking her to take one of the highest ranking positions in Interior. She took office September 8th, this month. Adele Ramos is a protector of the environment. What will your sentence be? Nan Waller was always concerned about the less fortunate. She works as a legal aid attorney and public defender. She became a juvenile court referee and over time established herself as one of the nation's most innovative experts in juvenile law. She started a statewide program called Take the Time that helps families avoid the legal system altogether. She was appointed by Governor Kitzhaber to the County Circuit Court in December of 2009. She will receive the Public Service Award from the Oregon Bar. What will your sentence be? Jim Kloski was the most relevant professor I had at the University of Oregon Political Science Department. He passed away this year. Frog is a man who sells jokes books on 13th Street. What's invisible and smells like carrots? Bunny farts. Most of his jokes were no funnier and no more appropriate. My fraternity friends and I looked down upon this dirty man who dwelled our streets. One day, Professor Kloski told us that Frog was in a court battle over whether he could continue to ply his trade. Kloski said, you have to decide who you're for. This process is one of deciding what and who you're for, and I'm for Frog. Thanks to Jim Kloski, I'm for Frog too, and so are many others. Zach Kloski is one of Jim's sons. Jim's most proud legislative achievement as chair of a political party in this state was the democracy checkoff, allowing taxpayers to give $1 to the political party of their choice by just checking a box on their tax form, so that there could be some pods of political power that would be a bit less accountable to private interest owners. Zach Kloski got along after his father passed away during the middle of the legislative session, along with his brothers and family members, and actually members of my family, and said, we ought to pass that again. It sunsetted after 4 years. But Jim had passed away after the session had started. We were told it was too late. It was past the bill filing deadline. Zach and his team got a member to use a priority bill, which allowed the bill to be filed even after the deadline. It was a huge recession that we were in the middle of. The fiscal impact of the bill was said that would kill the bill. The team got the Revenue Department to offer suggestions to the bill so that it would reduce the fiscal impact. When there was worry that the lifelong Democrat Kloski's idea would be seen as a one party's idea, the little team got Republican and Democratic Party chairs to support the bill and recruited a former Kloski student, a well-thought-of Republican legislator and friend of mine, to be a co-sponsor. $1 is not the same as it was, so instead they made it $3, and now it is law. Nick Kloski is a first-year student in your law school. What will your sentence be? Your generation used to be our generation. I guess never really. You were always the same number of years younger than me than you are now. But I used to think of myself as in the same generation of law students, and I must admit it is disappointing to me now that I no longer am. You now see me as an adult. This is very upsetting. You understand that our generation is not part of the prepared words, but that our generation has many similarities, but one difference is in video game habits. You are in the Halo generation. Anybody played this Halo game? I appreciate that very much. I know a lot of law students here, they're busy studying, but at least you, my friend, play video games. I am in the Asteroids generation. I played this Halo game. It's three-dimensional fight, killing game, whatever, you kill people. That's supposed to teach something good. And I played this game, and I've never like killed a guy. Like they're on top of me, they're in front, and then I'm dead. But you put me in the center of the screen, let me spin around until I lose. That's Asteroids, by the way. Young people, decades ago, by the largest margin that young people had ever elected any president, elected President named Franklin Roosevelt, who built the 20th century social justice infrastructure. My point is not about Franklin Roosevelt, but about that generation. Your generation will change the world. This past election, unprecedented numbers of young people participated. In fact, more young voters voted than in any election at an aggregate level in the history of this country. Your generation cares more about common problems than the generation before you. And you are coming of age at the fulcrum of history. You are the generation with the staying power to make real change. And real transformation could take some years. In time for you to be a professor. In time for you to be on a nonprofit board. In time for you to be a judge. Time for you to be on the school. Time for you to be a county commissioner. Time for you to be a law firm partner. Time for you to be governor. At the time when we can build momentum to solve most of our, or many of our, daunting and exciting public challenges, the people in this room will not be merely studying for, but will in fact be wielding the reins of power. What do we want to do with that? What will your sentence be? The public interest doesn't take care of itself, it requires champions. So I'm not asking merely that you participate in public interest activities. I am asking that you fundamentally redesign the mechanisms by which we govern ourselves. I'm not just asking you to vote and volunteer. I'm asking you to change the world. And what does it take to change the world? I must admit, I'm not quite sure. But there are several things I think. At least it takes persistence, calculated insanity, and a belief that others are helping, even if you can't always see them, and even if sometimes they aren't. The private in the military was walking around the military base, picking up any piece of paper he could find and saying, that's not it. Any piece of paper, pick it up, that's not it. Hundreds and hundreds of pieces of paper, that's not it. Till finally the commanding officer on the base referred him to the psychiatrist on the barracks who determined the young man was deranged. Wrote for him his discharge papers. At which point the young man picked him up and said, that's it. Persistence and calculated insanity. Also belief that others are helping. I saw Mary Van Noy, but she's a friend from way back when. I met her when she was in University of Oregon in her graduate student. And I was younger and better. Man was driving down a country road and he crashed into a ditch. And to his good fortune came along a strong pulling horse named Buddy, pulling the farmer. And the farmer tied the horse to the car and he said, pull, Billy, pull. And the horse didn't do anything. He said, pull, Betsy, pull. Still nary a flicker. And finally, almost nonchalantly, he said, pull, Buddy, pull. And the horse very easily pulled the car out of the ditch. Now the driver was very appreciative but confused. He said, sir, thank you very much, but why did you call the horse by the wrong name? And the farmer said, you gotta understand, Buddy's blind. And if he thought he was the only one pulling, he wouldn't even try. Why do we get together like this? We've got to be talking to the people who aren't coming to the meetings. But sometimes it's helpful to know that there are other people pulling, even if you can't always see them, and even if sometimes they are. Because ultimately it won't merely be yourselves, or your resume, or your professors asking you what you want your sentence to be, what you want history to look like. Ultimately, it will be your own grandchildren. And they will ask you, where were you? Where were you when this country still was the envy of world markets? Where were you? Where were you when we still had an education system that had a modicum of equality among its outcomes? Where were you? Where were you when we still had lots of fossil fuels? Where were you when there was still plenty of topsoil? Where were you when the disparities of wealth in this country were still manageable enough that we could call it a democracy? Where were you? And you can say you were here. When we were figuring out an education system for this century, you were here. When we were figuring out a healthcare system to respond to modern costs and technology, you were here. When we were figuring out energy policy for this century, you were here. When we were figuring out what kind of country we wanted to be, what kind of state we were going to be, and how we were going to get there, you were here. And I thank you for being here. Thanks very much.